As you can see, it's raining here behind me at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, but we did get our 6 hours of Fast Friday in just in the nick of time. I'm Nathan Brown, your Motorsports Insider with the Indianapolis Star, here to break down everything we're hearing about, talking about, everything we saw and learned at Fast Friday at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, our 4th day of practice as we get ready for the 109th running of the Indianapolis 500. Let's start with the good. We had some blistering laps and some really close competition at the top of the timing charts today as Scott Dixon runs the fastest no-toe lap of the day at 232.561 miles an hour, just barely edging out his Chip Ganassi Racing teammate Alex Palou at 232.528. We had some really difficult conditions today, including a pair of crashes. The first very early on by Chip Ganassi Racing's Kyffin Simpson, who will be attempting to run his second Indy 500 later on this month. And Kyle Larson, who crashed for the second time in preparation for this year's race, that first one coming in the April 24th open test, that second day of that open test session. Those two drivers that we mentioned, Kyle Larson and Kyffin Simpson, we got a chance to talk to both of them after they were seen and released from the infield care center. Larson in particular felt incredibly calm, relaxed. He said he races a lot, and so he ends up crashing a lot. And so nothing about this really phases him at all. They were actually able to get the number 17 Chevy out on track before the day was over with, which is pretty incredible. I was walking back from the care center with less than an hour to go in this Fast Friday action. The car had just gotten back to the Aero McLaren garages not long ago, and I felt like I sat down in my seat and Larson was back out there on track. They only ran what you would call an install lap, basically just to make sure that all of the electrical work, everything setup-wise in the car was perfectly fine so that they could get out there for their first qualifying run and really that first practice that we'll see tomorrow morning. More about that here in a second. Just that nothing was wrong about the car that they hadn't been able to diagnose after that crash. They got a new front wing and a new rear wing on it, and Kyle said the car felt just fine. Kyffin Simpson, on the other hand, fairly reserved. I don't know that I sense any nerves, especially knowing that he's got two incredibly fast teammates and a team that has won this race a half dozen times before. But you do have to wonder for a driver like Kyffin, who's only run this race once before, didn't have a whole lot to show for his first year in the Indy 500 as a rookie last year. So we'll see with a brand new chassis that they are having to roll out after that car nearly did a full barrel roll after doing a 180 that sent him into the wall for the first time. He hit the wall, got the car almost all the way around in the air, slammed back down on the ground, and then skidded across the track onto pit lane, tapped the wall before he finished up there. Let's hear from both of those drivers now.
Just got loose in 3. Just kind of had a lot of front grip, and just kind of swung the back around on me. So ended up spinning and getting to the wall a couple of times. So bummer, but I think it didn't look too major of damage. I didn't think, just as we quickly drove by the car. So I'm sure we'll be fine for tomorrow.
Just kind of felt odd the whole run. Felt like something was a bit off. Just tried going right on my weight jacket the whole time to try to settle the car down, and it never really seemed to help. So just gonna go discuss with the team what we think could have happened and try to move on. Yeah, it was a bit weird. I hit the wall, and then I was in the air pretty soon after that, but I didn't realize I was in the air until I took a look out the aero screen, and I was like, oh, that's the ground, that's not good. So just glad I didn't end up on my roof, and then after that I was just hoping I wouldn't hit the attenuator.
So not only did Scott Dixon have the fastest no-toe lap of the day, but he also had the fastest 4-lap average, and that's, of course, on a day like today, the most important stat of all, frankly. Now, we did have, as I mentioned earlier, a handful of drivers who might string together 2 solid laps or 3 solid laps. And otherwise, if they had been able to put a lap similar to what they had done in their first one or their first couple, might have ranked up here a little bit higher. But when it comes down to qualifying for this race, it's about putting those 4 laps together, even if you have a bobble, even if you have a moment, even if it feels like keeping your foot in the gas is going to be potentially troublesome. The guys who are able to keep their feet down and have the car underneath them that allow them to do it ultimately are the ones that we will see attempting to vie for this pole here on Sunday. That top 10 of those 4-lap averages in the qualifying simulations that we saw drivers to do today, Scott Dixon with a fastest 4-lap average of 232.366. Alex Palou, Scott McLaughlin, Colton Herta, and Kyle Kirkwood round out your top 5. You got 3 different teams represented there: Chip Ganassi Racing, Andretti Global, and Team Penske. Probably the 3 teams that, as we sit right now, we feel like are likely to be vying for pole, and the strongest cars that I think we've seen both in race running and in single lap or 4-lap no-toe action so far this week. 6th fastest, Felix Rosenquist. You got Christian Lundgaard for Arrow McLaren, by far and away their fastest and strongest driver that we've seen on track so far this week. 8th, a little bit of a surprise, Prema Racing rookie Robert Schwartzman, followed by Juncos Hollinger Racing's Stingray Robb, and at 10th you have that 3rd driver for Andretti Global, Marcus Ericsson, your 2022 Indy 500 winner. Your overall fastest lap, Scott McLaughlin topped that today, just beating out Scott Dixon. Scott McLaughlin threw down a really early lap that just barely had a little bit of toe, and he sat there for much of the day when it turned out, and no one was really able to top it, large in part because you really started to get into this rhythm where you just had 1 or 2 drivers out on track getting really serious about these qualifying simulations. An interesting thing to note as we look at the bottom of this list on the no toe charts, or just on the overall laps, because we had some drivers like Kyle Larson and Kyffin Simpson who really didn't run any meaningful laps today. Let's look at this list here first for a second. 28th fastest overall, Graham Rahal. 29th, Ryan Hunter-Reay. 30th, Devlin DeFrancesco, Rahal's teammate at RLL. 31st, Nolan Siegel. 32nd, Jack Harvey. 33rd, Kyle Larson, and 34th, Kyffin Simpson. Now those cars that finished today on the 1-lap timesheets, 26th to 32nd, bunched up there really tight. Not only did they not crack 230 miles an hour today, but all of those cars finished within 0.6 mile an hour of each other. And I feel like that's the area where you start to wonder if someone is going to fall into this last chance qualifier period. You've got, I'd say, cars maybe in the 20th fastest cars or so, probably safe. And then once you get beyond that, you're starting to wonder, what qualifying draw spot did I draw? Did someone who should be slower than me get a great draw and is able to throw up a great run before we get too deep into the day and be able to sit comfortable and potentially not have to go out? And then you'll also see, once we get late in the day, guys who are, below, say, 25th or so and starting to get a little bit on the bubble. You're going to have teams that are trimming out more, taking more risks. Drivers who are just going to say, I'm going to run 4 laps with my foot in it, and if I end up in the wall, so be it. But before we finish up here, let's go through some of these positions in the qualifying order that we will see tomorrow, because I think there's some really interesting things that develop from this. Again, it's totally random. The drivers, either drivers or their representatives, are called up in the order in which they finished on the timing charts today overall. So your fastest driver of the day, Scott McLaughlin, is picking first, and then go all the way down the list. And they or their representatives pick randomly a box that has a coin in it, so you can't see the coin when they're picking it. And then that coin has a number 1 through 34. And so then that tells you where that driver is going to make their first qualifying attempt in comparison to the rest of the field. That last hour or so of qualifying on this Saturday gets really interesting, really fascinating strategies and decisions from folks. And you've got some really fast folks trying to get into that fast 12, and you've also got some folks right there on the bubble that are trying to ensure themselves a spot in the race. It's a great time. If you're coming out to the track tomorrow, or if you're watching it, I would encourage you to watch that part. That qualifying draw that we saw happened here at the end of the day after practice finished. And there were a lot of drivers that ended up with some of these prime positions that didn't necessarily have the strongest day today, or maybe haven't really had the strongest weeks got Marcus Ericsson, Andretti Global's, I would say probably third or fourth fastest driver from what we've seen so far this week. He goes off first. Now, not necessarily the prime position. There's kind of a temperature window that I think drivers would like to go in, and obviously first is going to be the earliest, so it's going to be the coolest track. We will have had an hour of practice, so it won't be totally green, but typically drivers like to go out in that like 5th to 10th spot or so. It's kind of the sweet spot. You've got Pato Ward, who we haven't talked a whole lot about this week because he just really hasn't been the slowest, he hasn't been the fastest. He's kind of been in no man's land so far despite having finished runner-up in this race 2 of the last 3 years. He'll go off second. You've got Kyffin Simpson, a really important person who needs a chance in optimal conditions to go out with his brand new car that they will be rolling out. He goes off third. Robert Schwartzman, who we talked about earlier, he was a surprise finisher in that top 10 in those 4-lap averages. A rookie coming into this year's race, someone that I think we thought coming into this first week of practice and even through some of these first practices over these last couple of days, someone that I was definitely keeping my eye on in terms of possibly falling into that 31 through 34 spot and being in that LCQ on Sunday. He goes off fourth. You got Alexander Rossi, who had a very tough day today, really struggling to find some speed and some comfort in that car. He goes off fifth. Ryan Hunter-Reay and Jack Harvey going back-to-back at 6th and 7th for Giant Reinbold Racing, a team that, as we were reading off those names, slowest laps today, Harvey 32nd, Ryan Hunter-Reay 29th. Important for that team to get some optimal spots to try and throw up a 4-lap average that only a handful of people can beat and find themselves comfortably in the race. And then I go on down the list. Graham Rahal starting tomorrow, 10th. That's a great spot for Graham, who, even though he's been talking really positively and trying to look on the bright side of things as a driver who has found himself in this LCQ each of the last 2 years, really struggling today in particular. Nolan Siegel, again, someone who's yet to qualify for this race. He's still a rookie, even though he's completed nearly a full season. He struggled to find some speed today and is starting 11th. And then you go on down the list. Drivers from Team Penske starting no better in order than 18th, which is where we find Will Power. You've got drivers like Alex Palou, 25th, Kyle Kirkwood, 30th, Devlin DeFrancesco, who was someone who has been slow here and there, 31st in line. Callum Ilott, completely opposite to his teammate Robert Schwartzman. He goes off 32nd. And then you've got Joseph Newgardner, 2-time defending Indy 500 winner, 33rd, and Rinus VeeKay going last here in that run through the order. Again, all this action begins tomorrow at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway at 11 a.m. We'll have an hour long of practice. The field split in half, 30 minutes, go from 8:30 or 30 minutes. 7 drivers go from 8:30 to 9. 17 more drivers go from 9 to 9:30, and then we will have a couple hours with nothing on track before we get going on these first qualifying simulations. We'll have another edition of Pit Pass Live tomorrow evening, talking about who made it into the Fast 12, who barely missed out and knows where they're starting for the May 25th race, who barely made it off of the bubble, and who does not yet know if they have a spot in the 109th running of the Indy 500. I'm Nathan Brown, your Motorsports Insider with the Indianapolis Star. Thanks for watching today's edition of Pit Pass Live.